Everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Triple Option Talk podcast. As you might already noticed, we are shortened down to just two people today. Our brother Jake, who's been on us from episodes 1 to 3 and is, a member of the show. He is on a golf trip right now. He's a big golfer, for those who don't know. So he is out on a golf trip. So he will unfortunately be missing out on this episode. But that doesn't mean the show still can't go on, because guess what? College football still happened this past Saturday, and we're excited about it, and we want to talk about it. So, Jake, you're here with us in spirit. So we're just going to hop right into it. I'll let Chase say some introductory things, and once he does, we're going to get right back into the last Saturday recap, because there were some very prominent results that happened this past Saturday and this past Sunday. And unfortunately, this past Monday, which, yes, we will get into that if you already know what we're talking about, because you probably do, because you can see the jersey behind me. By the way, Jordan, please come back. Please. But we'll get into all of that later. Chase, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Like we always say, this is yes, we are Florida State fans, but this is a all college football podcast. So we don't want to just talk solely about Florida State, but don't get me wrong, we will talk about Florida State. But I
feel like even if we weren't Florida State fans, we'd still be all over this conversation, because it's a big deal right now.
And I don't want to say how I'm feeling too much right now, because like I said, we're about to get into it in the show. But I want to lead off by saying a quote said by a man named Jackson Schrader. Jackson Schrader, if you're watching, shout out to you. I might butcher his quote, but after the Florida State loss, he is also a Florida State fan. He said these beautiful words that have just motivated my spirits.
My favorite ginger, by the way.
Football is a dream. Let's not make it a nightmare. And I'm like, you know what? Yes, Florida State's 0-2. Yes, it is a horrific start to the season. But nonetheless, we still have college football, man. Like, college football is still around us. We're going to enjoy it while we can. And with that being said, let us hop into the show with the first segment. Week 2 is right around the corner. But before we talk about Week 2, we got to recap what happened in a wild and crazy Week 1. So we each picked 2 games each that we kind of want to highlight the most. This previous Week 1. So, Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and let you start. What is the first game you want to talk about in this crazy and very entertaining Week 1 of college football?
I personally can't relate, but Chase, you probably can. I'm kidding. I just love saying that when ex-girlfriends are brought into the conversation.
Okay.
But Miami and Florida, even as a Florida State fan, I said this last episode and I'll say it again. Miami and Florida was like watching your 2 ex-girlfriends fight each other, and you're just trying to figure out which one do you hate more.
Which one's uglier?
Even though I know which one's uglier, but even though Florida State, happens to be 0-2 in the standings right now. No, that wasn't a shot on you. I'm just saying Florida's uglier.
I was like, yo, hang on.
I wasn't saying anything about you. I wasn't saying anything about you, your past relationship.
Okay,
Don't get me
I got
wrong.
you. You're talking about Miami, Florida. Okay, I got you.
Yes. So the Miami Hurricanes, let's just say they kind of made fried gator bites, maybe with a little side of buttermilk ranch. This past Saturday
maybe a little Chipotle sauce if yours on top.
Maybe if you're feeling risky, because they went down to the Swamp. The Swamp.
Karen Moore was feeling risky, all right.
Look, some say the Swamp is one of the most deadly places to play a college football game. And, to some, that statement might be true. But they went down there and dominated their in-state rivals in front of a national audience, including some of their big-time recruits. But we'll get into that in a minute. Ugly. And Miami won the game by a piercing score of 41-17. Now listen, Cam Ward stole the show. There's no doubt about that. He's making an early case to be a Heisman front runner. Threw 26 for 35 on his passes, 385 combined yards, 3 touchdowns and just 1 interception. On the opposing end, Florida struggled to establish sort of any rhythm, and their offense was flattened under the pressure of Miami's aggressive defense. Graham Mertz, some call one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the SEC, found little to no success, completing only 11 of 20 passes for 91 yards before being knocked out of the game at the end of the third quarter. That's right. After all the fans sung, "We won't back down," Graham Mertz did back down because we didn't see him in the fourth quarter. And Florida went 1 for 9 on third down conversions. Now, this win also sets the stage for the Hurricanes to rapidly improve their numbers in the college football playoff race. As it stands right now, or as it stands before the game, their preseason ranking had them sitting behind Clemson and Florida State. Well, guess where they're at right now? Nearing the top 10 in the AP polls. And in the second quarter, that's when Miami really decided to extend their dominance. They capitalized on Florida's mistakes. Two crucial roughing the passer penalties by Florida's defense kept Miami's drive continuing, which both resulted in touchdowns. Ward's best throw was a 23-yard strike to Kobe George in the back of the end zone, which showcased his ability to place the ball perfectly under pressure, which we already saw that when he was at Washington State. And Ward continued to carve up Florida's defense in the third quarter, while Miami's rushing attack continued to chip away the clock. And he once showcased again his talented arm in the third quarter with the perfectly placed ball on the edge to George once again. Now, Miami's defense, they continued to stop Florida just like it was Steve Irwin in the Florida Swamp, which, by the way, if you know Steve Irwin, rest in peace. And their star defensive end, Ruben Bain, after the first series, did not slow them down. Despite Bain's absence, the Hurricanes defense held Florida to just one more touchdown throughout the remainder of the game. And listen, like I said before, Ward's debut, Miami's quarterback, was nothing short of spectacular. On the other end, Graham Mertz did horrible to the point where he's being benched against Samford, which shout out to the West Georgia Wolves, who just beat Samford in their first ever Division I game. And look, but that wasn't even the worst part of it, Chase. The worst part was after the fact, when in the fourth quarter, when Cam Ward threw his third touchdown, a Florida defensive back found himself stuck in the hedges behind one of the end zones, and it just so happened to be the end zone where all Florida's recruits were sitting, and they all whipped out their phones. They all started laughing, pointing the clown emoji up, and afterwards, defensive back Michael Powell from the Miami Hurricanes went up to the Florida recruits with the U's up and said, "You better come to Miami." And then linebacker Jalen Alderman said, "Come to the U. Don't come here." That is embarrassing. That is how you know Billy Napier and his program is on a steady decline. But Chase, look, I threw in all the details there. Chase, I think you've got a prominent game you got to get into yourself, buddy.
Oh, yeah. So, embarrassing showing for the Swamp. But I'll tell you a game that was an embarrassment. In fact, it was on the Thursday, the first day of college football. And what a matchup to kick it off. The FCS prominent program, North Dakota State, traveled to primetime Colorado and played a banger of a game in Colorado. Now, when you looked at this game, the most significant difference was North Dakota State's inability to stop Colorado's dynamic offense, very specifically, their dynamic passing attack led by Shadir Sanders and Travis Hunter. Now,
and Horn Jr. Shout out to you.
Well, I'm gonna get to him. But I'm gonna read off actually all three of their stats really quick. Shadir Sanders threw 26 for 34, 445 passing yards, 4 TDs, and just 1 interception. That was a ridiculous interception in the red zone. At the goal line, actually, where it hit off the back of a defender's calf that was laying on the ground, bounced in the air, and it was intercepted. Very unfortunate, not Sanders' fault. But for all those who are doubting that Sanders could really potentially be a Heisman candidate, these are prime Heisman numbers. This isn't just a good game. These are prime Heisman numbers. But let me read you some more Heisman numbers by Travis Hunter, who caught 7 balls for 132 yards and 3 touchdowns. His third touchdown already being contention for catch of the year, corner of the end zone, defender all over him, under contact, falling to the ground, reach, and still maintain possession of the ball. If you haven't seen the replay, you've been living under a rock, because a highlight reel has been everywhere on social media. But like you said, Jimmy Horn Jr., what did he do? Heisman numbers, 7 catches, 198 yards, and a touchdown himself. Now, Travis Hunter, of course, made some extraordinary plays, but the biggest concern for Colorado, or my bad, North Dakota State, was Colorado's slot receivers finding wide open space in the middle of the field. North Dakota State's linebackers were practically non-existent, and it was because of the all-American absence of their defensive back, Cole Wizinski, I believe that's pronounced his name. He's an All-American that was for North Dakota State last year. He could not play due to injury, and his absence was very well known because there was no defense in the middle of the field. Now, North Dakota State was able to stay in the game due to its run defense. The Bison held Colorado to 2.5 yards per carry and made some pivotal stops in short situations. Now, while Colorado had a future NFL draft pick leading its offense, North Dakota State's quarterback and Cam Miller had a performance that you can't look over. He threw 18 for 22, 277 pass yards, a touchdown, and had 81 rushing yards, which led the team. He led the Bisons in rushing yards.
He was good on his feet.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And aside from what Miller did on the ground, combined with Shamar Brown, North Dakota State averaged 3.33 yards on the run. So really, Cam Miller was the prominent guy on the rushing and passing side of the offense. He did it all for the Bison. So North Dakota State had 5 red zone opportunities, but they only scored on one of them, one touchdown on those 3 attempts. So if the Bison would have scored just one more touchdown on those 5 red zone opportunities, that game would have been drastically different. Because remember that Hail Mary they threw to potentially tie the game, it was just short of the end zone. So crazy game. Colorado won 31-26, and it was really all due to that offensive showing on Colorado. Now, their offensive line was horrendous, but I'm not going to talk about that quite yet. I'm going to talk about that later in the episode. But right now, Andrew, what was another crazy game that you want to highlight in this, again, insane week 1 of college football?
Well, the previous episode, one of the biggest games that I was high on when we were previewing the weekend's action was College Game Day in College Station taking place at Kyle Field. And even in the episode, I'll get into that. Even just hold your fort down. But even in the episode before then, I was praising Mike Elko for his accomplishments at Duke and how he's going to transfer over that to Aggie Nation. Now listen, more than 100,000 attended this defensive battle on Saturday night. And it's expected. Kyle Field always packed the house. Texas A&M, unfortunately to me, because I picked the Aggies, began their season with a 23-13 loss to the Fighting Irish. And look, it was a close game, marked by extraordinary defense before the Fighting Irish run game finally broke down A&M's front 7. One of the five largest crowds in Kyle Field history took place during that game, but they fell silent when Jeremiah Love's touchdown with less than 2 minutes left gave Notre Dame that edge to push him through. But listen, and I'm going to go and state the obvious. Notre Dame, obviously, top 5 defense in college football. There's no hiding that. But don't shy away. A&M might also have one of the best defenses in the country. Outside of 3 long runs from the Irish, the Aggies looked really good. Notre Dame was just 2 for 12 on third downs and averaged just 5 yards per pass play. And this is with Riley Leonard in the backfield now. And the trouble is the Aggies average a poor 3.3 yards per pass attempt. Even in the episode last week, I talked about how Connor Wingman was going to be the most underrated quarterback in the SEC. He almost had a Graham Mertz performance with mere 200 yards and 2 crucial interceptions with no trip to the end zone for Connor Wingman. And look, on run plays and pass plays, A&M defenders lived in the backfield until the final drive, of course. And Notre Dame's quarterback, as mentioned earlier, Riley Leonard, had little time to pass, and he couldn't push the ball downfield. And he finished 18 for 30 with 158 yards. That's not any better than Connor Wingman minus the 2 interceptions. And early on, it was clear that defenses would reign over this game. In the first half, Leonard completed 11 passes for 74 yards, while Notre Dame racked up 65 yards on 14 carries. But 29 of those came on a run from Love. And by the end of the game, Notre Dame was able to take the lead on an 80-yard drive, as mentioned before. But listen, like I said earlier, what held the Aggies down this game aside from, the Irish's good defense was Connor Wingman. He has to improve if he wants to maintain his draft status. I mean, this is prime-time football.
What? He looked so lost on the field. It kind of seemed like Elko was trying to match Riley Leonard's play style to him, and it just didn't work out because he had trouble finding the field. His field vision was horrible. And to be fair, no credit to Notre Dame secondary who was locking down receivers, but it's like he just couldn't find options, and he tried to force passes, which, like you said, ended in costly turnovers. And I'm interested to see what Mike Elko does to him next week and see if he can kind of pursue him to be his own quarterback and not try to form him into Riley Leonard. If that makes sense, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and A&M seemed to be the most effective when Wingman was handing the ball off instead of passing it. And that's saying something for a rushing offense that mustered just 3.8 yards a carry. And like I said, Wingman finished at 12 for 30 with a mere 100 yards. And Wingman did look good on throwing outside breaking routes, and he used his legs to extend plays and extend drives. So I'll give him credit for that. But his hard count also forced several offsides for Notre Dame, which I think is a very underlooked part of his play style. But he did put the ball in harm's way very repeatedly, and that proved to be very costly. On his first interception, his intended target had separation, but Wingman overthrew the ball to Noah Thomas. And on the second, Xavier Watts jumped a pass over the middle intended for Theo Millen, and the tight end looked to be breaking open, but the pass was low and behind him, and Watts undercut the route, which led to the interception. But look, like I said, I talked a lot about A&M, but I'm not going to shy away. Aggies, top 5 defense. Shoot, I'll even say top 3 defense in college football.
Okay. Based on week one, absolutely.
By the way they looked playing in that hostile atmosphere, and by the way they looked against the SEC offense, Notre Dame, they could go undefeated this year. And I'm being genuine. They could go undefeated this year. What sucks to see, because like we said, the playoff format's going to hold them out of the top 4 for that. But look again, it's just week 1. They could be riding a high right now. We see how Notre Dame always seems to fail expectations. But don't be surprised if the Fighting Irish continue to push the luck of the Irish and finish undefeated. But Chase, let's wrap this segment up and talk about another game that might have surprised a lot of eyes.
Now, the game he's talking about is a game that happened in the bins between Dabo Sweeney and Kirby Smart, Clemson and Georgia, Mr. I don't know what the transfer portal is versus I'm going to use a transfer portal like everybody else in college football, Clemson and Georgia in the bins. Now, the final score was 34-3. And while the score might not look particularly pretty, don't let it deceive you from what Clemson displayed on the field in the first half.
Now, very important. Emphasis on that first half.
Before I start, Andrew, I talked to Andrew about this before the game, and I told him exactly what was going to happen. I said if Clemson's going to lose this game, it's not because they're not going to be able to stop Carson Beck and limit Georgia's offense. It's because they're not going to be able to produce against Georgia's defense, and that is exactly what lost us the game against the Tigers. Now, Georgia only held a 6-0 lead over Clemson heading into halftime, and that was solely due to the incredible display shown by the Tigers' defensive line. Now, for Georgia, Mike Bobo sort of displayed this conservative play calling that he showed in the first couple games of last year, but I feel like that was part of that was just him trying to figure out Dabo's defense, and I feel like because of what happened, and I feel that way because of how Georgia looked in the second half, and Georgia's offense looked in the second half.
Now, keep in mind, even though Georgia was out Trevor Etienne for this first game, they still had a top 3 player coming out of high school in the entire nation as their starting running back. And Clemson's defensive line did not allow any gaps to be open for him and limited Georgia on the ground. So shout out to the Tigers on that end, for real.
Well, actually, that was my next point, and that was, despite the absence of Trevor Etienne, who he missed that game because of the DUI, Nate Frazier, who Nick Saban gave plenty of praise for. Actually, Nick Saban said that Frazier is the best running back to come out of his class, and technically, Frazier is 4th on Georgia's depth chart, which just shows you how deep the Bulldogs are in terms of running back. But he ended up putting up great numbers. Now, in the first half, players like Wade Woodaz and Pete Woods did a great job at exploding in the backfield and applying pressure to Carson Beck, which forced him to make some questionable throws, which is what kept Georgia out of the end zone. But now, like I said, let's look into the second half. It took less than 3 minutes for Carson Beck to make a great connection to Aaron Smith and end the drive with a 7-yard touchdown pass to Kobe Young. This is when the passing game really started to expand and open up and shine for Georgia, and Beck started to return to his Hyman stature. He ended up throwing 23 for 33, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 91.7 QB rating. Now, like I mentioned before, I want to highlight Nate Frazier, who ran for 83 yards and 11 carries and a touchdown. And players like Jalen Walker, KJ Bolden, and Malachi Starks, who made an incredible interception in the third quarter. Again, if you haven't seen the replay of that, you've been living under a rock, because that's been all over the highlight. That highlight reel has been all over socials recently. But I'm going to look at Cade Klubnik. 18 for 29, 140 yards, an interception, and a 40.8 QB rating.
This is where the problem lies.
91.7 QB rating. And it was exactly like I said. Clemson's defensive line played incredible. They limited Frazier as much as they could, but the problem was their defense was on the field in basically the entire game because Klubnik and Dabo's offense couldn't connect. It was too much. KJ Bolden, Malachi Starks had every receiver covered, and Klubnik's not the type of quarterback that's going to be able to make a play when his receivers are covered. He can't just scramble outside the pocket and make play on his feet like Beck necessarily can, and that was a killer for Clemson. Georgia's D-line was feasting in the trenches, so it's not like they could just run the ball. So when the secondary locked up their receivers, it's like Klubnik had no option other than force some questionable throws or try to make a play on his feet like he just ultimately couldn't do, and that forced Clemson's defense to get on the field over and over and over again, eventually tiring out the linebackers, the secondary, and the defensive line that was so prominent in the first half, and that's why Georgia just exploded in the second half. Now, I don't like what Dabo said after the game. His press conference was very questionable, but the comment that really got to me the most was, well, Georgia does this to a lot of opponents. Dabo, hear me out. You said last year, if Clemson is a stock, you better buy into it as quick as you can. No, listen.
He's not Dave Ramsey. He's not Dave Ramsey. He gets bad financial advice.
If you really mean what you say, and you really think that without using the transfer portal, that you can bring Clemson back to a top-tier football program in college football, then you're going to have to beat teams like Georgia. Clemson, in my opinion, I'm going to have to see more of them, but they still maybe can make a case to win the ACC. But if they make the playoffs in general, they're going to have to play teams like Georgia. So you can't just sit around and say, oh, well, Georgia does this to everybody, so it's not that big of a deal. No, you're going to have to figure out how to get that offense clicking so when you make the playoffs, you can beat teams like Georgia. That's your key to success. That's how you're going to make Clemson reign again as a top program in college football. You can't just go around, pat yourself on the back, say, we'll try again next time. No, you got to figure out your answers now because the playoffs are right around the corner. They're going to come quicker than you think. And you can't have the same mindset if you face a team like Georgia, Texas, Ohio State come playoff time, because if you're due, you're going to be a first-round exit or second-round exit if they win the ACC.
It sets such a prominent program to such a low standard. And listen, Dabo Swinney used to be one of my favorite coaches. Despite being one of Florida State's biggest conference rivals, I just admired the guy and the way that he took control of the game.
Well, and so did everybody else in college football.
And use his own method to win football games and to win championship games. But just like life, Dabo, things change, things evolve, and you have to adapt to the new format of things. And Dabo Swinney is so stuck up in his ways. I understand he doesn't like the transfer portal. I understand a lot of coaches don't like it in the new way the NIL has taken over the game. That's why Nick Saban is on the game day crew instead of on the field with a headset. And Dabo Swinney, if you're not willing to make the necessary adjustments to how college football is nowadays, whether you like it or not, you're going to end up being stuck in the mud. You're not going to have any motor to push you out from where you are. And shoot, if you don't like it, join Saban on game day. I mean, just don't sit here and continue to pretend that your method is gonna work and it's eventually gonna bolster you back to where you used to be, because that's just not how things work. You're gonna have to get the talent that's not always in your reach, and that's gonna be done through the portal. Dabo, wake up. Wake up, or Death Valley is going to live true to its name, and you're going to die there too. You got to wake up, Dabo.
And if you want to be real technical, this is a problem, or not a problem, but it's just what happens in every sport. The game is always changing, and a part of coaching is adjusting to these changes and figure out how you can be successful with a new strategy. Like, your strategy is going to have to change. You can't keep the old ways in a new game and expect it to work. It's like insanity. You can't try the same thing over and over again and expect different results. What used to work one time is not going to work a second time. You got to adjust. You got to make the change. Speaking of change, we're going to transition to week number 2 of college football, because we have some key games that we want to talk about.
Hold on. No. We are not going to jump over Monday night that easy. I know you like to put it in your rearview mirror, but some things need to be said. Well, I'm going to make this quick because I don't want to take too much time left on the segment. But listen, all of you guys out there who may be watching, you're just waiting for us to make some kind of comment about it. Listen, I understand. We had a tough loss to Georgia Tech in Ireland. We came back home looking to rebound against a well-coached Bill O'Brien Boston Eagles team. And guess what didn't happen? What I just said. BC came out there and won the game 28-13. There's no shying away from that. DJ, you need to get a job. DJ, you need to get off this field. DJ, you need to sit on the bench so Brock Lynn can start. Through 21 for 42. Oh, Andrew, that's 50%. 50% only gets you halfway in life, folks. 272 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Look, you know what hurt me the most, aside from DJ missing a wide-open Darian Williamson in the top left corner of the end zone? Do you know what hurt me the most? Was the former Seminole Trayshawn Ward putting up 61 yards on 3 receptions with 1 touchdown on the same stupid out route that continued to pierce us every single game. What did Mike Norvell say after the game was all said and done and the upset happened on Labor Day night? He said, "I'm sick of how the season has started." No kidding, Mike Norvell. So are we. Tonight, I failed in preparing the team to go out and respond. You've got a football team that nobody envisioned ever being where we are and having disappointment, having failure. But I do believe in what this team can do. You can believe in them all you can, Mike Norvell. You can believe in them all you can. But until we see results, the belief is not going to carry with you out to the crowd. Thank goodness this bye week landed when it did, because it could not have come at a better time. Because guess who we had to play the next week? We had to play the Memphis Tigers, who very well could be the group of 5 team we see in the playoffs this year. They are no joke. That is Mike Norvell's former team that's going to take the helm in Tallahassee. And if we do not get our stuff together, if we're not going to start Brock Lynn, who looks far more impressive with the deep ball against Georgia's defense than DJU has ever this season, if we're not going to get DJU figured out, then at least get the offensive line figured out, because we're getting dominated in the trenches week in and week out, and it's getting sickening.
Hey, let's breathe. We have other things to talk about. We can't get heated right now, but we do have to move on for time purposes. But I do want to make a quick comment real quick. It's not just the offensive line that's the issue. I'd say it's more so on the defensive line. We are 2 weeks into college football. A defensive line that's supposed to be the top of the ACC has recorded only one sack, and it was Monday night against Boston College on Castellanos. That was barely even a sack. I mean, Marvin Jones Jr., Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton are putting no pressure. They are getting manhandled in the trenches, and if you face quarterbacks like Haynes King, like Castellanos, quarterbacks that can make plays on the run, on their feet, then applying no pressure is going to kill you. And that is exactly what happened. Listen, I said last week that the only thing that's going to put a smile on my face about this season is if we beat Boston College on Monday. Well, guess what? That didn't happen. So I'm very bitter about the Seminoles team.
Now, but let's talk about week 2, right? I mean, there's no better way to get feeling better than week 2 football, right?
Because Florida State don't play. So let's turn our attention away from this devastating start and talk about what we have to look forward in week number 2 of college football. Now, Angie, if it's okay, I'd like to get this segment started.
Sure, go for it.
Now, I talked about Colorado playing North Dakota State in week 1, but all eyes are going to remain on prime time in Colorado as they travel to Nebraska, the Cornhusker State, where Matt Rule is trying to roll Nebraska back into a top-tier college program, which, by the way, if it's anything like his NFL career, then they're going downhill pretty fast.
Yeah, he's going to need a Bill O'Brien-type rebound.
Yeah, but this is so... As I talked about North Dakota State and Colorado, the quarterbacks were the key matchup to watch. And that's the same story here in this matchup of week 2, as we have 2 of the most popular quarterbacks in college football, and Shasir Sanders, who's a Heisman favorite, of course, and Dylan Raiola, who is a UGA commit and the biggest prospect Nebraska has ever had since 2005. I didn't believe that was true. I had to double check that, and yeah, it's true. Since 2005, he's the biggest prospect they ever had. Now, this is what's going to kill the Buffaloes in this game, and it's the lack of a rushing attack. Like I mentioned in week 1, they averaged 2.5 yards per carry behind running back Dylan Hayden. And this is majorly, this is what I want to bring up, majorly because of the horrible O-line that forced Shedeur Sanders to pull off a magic trick every single time he snapped the ball. Yeah. Now, players like Mason Goldman are going to go for Sanders' head if the Buffaloes O-line does not buy him time for him to revamp and continue that high-powered and explosive offense game that the Buffaloes displayed in week 1. Now, while he may be able to escape the pocket, you have stars on Nebraska in the backfield like Malcolm Hartzog and Ramir Stewart, who each recorded interception last week against UTEP. They're going to make it hard for Sanders to make a play outside the pocket and find an open receiver. And what this means is he can't rely on these magic trick plays. He's going to need that O-line to buy him time to run play action for Horn Jr., to allow Travis Hunter to go on these deep routes and shoot. Dylan Heyman. If the O-line can even allow Dylan Heyman, if they can force a guy from the run through where he can at least get 5 yards per carry, then that's going to help Colorado a ton against a stacked and very underrated Nebraska defense.
Yep.
Now, an impressive feat that I want to talk about that made the headlines is, do you realize how many snaps Travis Hunter played last week against North Dakota State?
I know it was at least 160.
Oh, and actually 136. 136 total snaps against North Dakota State. Now, while he played an impressive game defensively for Colorado, he has players like Isaiah Nayer and Jamal Banks that's not only going to make Travis Hunter's day miserable, but he's going to put that entire Colorado secondary to work. Now, with that being said, this is my score prediction here. I'm getting you the message, Dion. Colorado's O-line. I'm telling you what needs to happen.
I'm sure they're listening. I'm sure they pull this video. I'm sure they're gonna pull this video up in their next practice.
Well, when we talk about this game in the next week's episode, I'll be talking about how severely disappointed I am that your O-line flopped once again. Their O-line is not going to be able to contain Malcolm Hartzog, Raheem Stewart. They are going for Sanders' head. They're going to make his time miserable. Now, Colorado's offense is explosive nonetheless. They are going to put points up on the board. But I'm expecting huge games from receivers Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks. I think Dylan Raiola is going to show that while he is that 5-star recruit that everybody desperately wanted, Matt Rule is going to be singing his praises after a 37-24 Nebraska win. You heard it here first.
Okay. Hey, Cornhusker Nation, they're with you. Now let's make these next few previews a little quick, not too quick, but I don't want to take up too much time.
Because we still have to do our game day picks.
Exactly. Let's head over to the Carolinas, where the Duke Mayo's Classic will be inhaling a very interesting matchup between number 14 ranked Tennessee and number 24 ranked NC State Wolfpack. A little nice SEC versus ACC matchup. Now, in case you missed it, on week 0, NC State struggled against an FCS Western Carolina team in a 38-21 escape win that required the Wolfpack to rally from a 21-17 deficit in the fourth quarter. Tennessee, on the other hand, torched an FCS opponent, Chattanooga, 69-3 behind a super first half by quarterback Nico Lamaliva, who threw for 314 yards in the blowout. Now, one team lived up to the expectations clearly, while the others did not. NC State was expected to be much more explosive offensively, but struggled with veteran Coastal Carolina transfer Grayson McCall, who has a lot of expectations on his back, until a 3-touchdown outburst in the fourth quarter. Now, the defense, partially in the trenches, had problems defending Western Carolina's rushing attack. Meanwhile, Tennessee's looked very elite on both offense and defense, an overlooked storyline for the Volunteers, where the offense that usually steals all the headlines. So basically what I'm posing here is that one team is on one end of the spectrum with a lot of uncertainty, while the other showcase just how dangerous they can be in the season. Now, it's all going to fall on the big test for the new and the old quarterbacks. McCall wasn't at his best last week. He completed 26 of 40 passes for 318 yards, but he missed several wide open receivers, and the offense stalled often in the first 3 quarters. We expect much more from the veteran, and we should get it in a big game against Tennessee. And if the past is any measure, McCall steps up in a lot of big situations. We saw that when he was at Coastal Carolina.
Yep.
And it's evident by winning 3 straight Sun Belt Player of the Year honors and his fourth quarter rally last week that he's a gamer, and we can't quickly forget that he set the single season record for passing efficiency in the FBS before Heisman Trophy winner Jane Daniels. So last season with Coastal Carolina, he was up there with very elite company. Now, the first-year starter lacks big game experience, but is more talented and has proven so with the 35-point drubbing of Iowa's top 5 defense in last season's bowl game against the contested performance last week against Chattanooga. And that's talking about Tennessee's quarterback. And, of course, Tennessee never seems to have problem scoring, and that shouldn't be an issue against an NC State squad that appears to have talent a step back. So with all that being said, as much as I like to see a close game, I don't think it's going to be as close as what the experts think, even though Tennessee comes in as only a 7.5-point favorite. I think even with an experienced quarterback, Tennessee's dominant offense is going to get the best of an NC State's defense that we haven't seen prove itself yet. I think that last week's scare against an FCS team is going to set them back a little bit more than they like. Give me Tennessee 38-17.
38-17. Okay. I don't hate that prediction. I don't hate it. Now, I'm gonna make this one. We still got some time, so I'm gonna highlight this one because we had to highlight this one. It is the game of the week in week 2 of college football. And it features a high-powered Texas offense that's led by Heisman favorite Quinn Ewers.
Some say that – oh, sorry, good.
I'm saying it's a stacked Michigan defense that's led by big boy Mason Graham, who people think will be the best defensive player in all college football.
Now, some say Will Ferrell is going to be on College Game Day this weekend, and Michael. So we're going to have a load. We're going to have a load of game day, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, Michigan is not an American favorite right now due to all the cheating scandals. I keep piling on. We all know what Quinn Ewers can do, Heisman favorite. By the way, shout out to Arch Manning for an incredible college football debut last week against Colorado State. Horns down still. But the big thing I want to highlight is the former walk-on, Davis Warren, that won the QB battle, won him the starting position, and he got his first career start in Michigan's 30-10 win against Fresno State. He went 15 for 25, and it was a good enough win, but there are some still questions that lie on Michigan's side of the offense. Can they sustain the run? They don't have Blake Corum anymore, and some of the personnel has changed, but Michigan's run-heavy identity, for the most part, stays the same. They want to run the football. That's their identity. That's what they want to do. The question is, will they be able to do it successfully against a Texas defense that sustains a running offense? Texas has a stacked D-line. And, lead running backs like Khalil Mullins and Dalton Edwards, they combined for an average 4.6 yards per carry in that season opening win against Fresno State. But 8 of the 26 rushing attempts went for 2 yards or less, which means even against a team like Fresno State, who, by the way, is the favorite to make the playoffs for the SES, but their D-line is not nearly as stacked as the Longhorns D-line, and running backs Khalil Mullins and Donovan Edwards still struggled to find the gaps and make their way down the open field.
I did pick Fresno State to upset Michigan and Ann Arbor. Fresno State played a great game through the first 3 quarters, so I'm not ashamed of my pick.
Oh, did you? I recorded on the last week's episode that you picked Michigan to win.
No, I picked Fresno State.
Oh, did you? Okay, I'll change that real quick. We'll get to that on the picks.
I mean, if you want to give me the point, I'll take it.
No, I'm not giving you the point. If you just admit to it, I appreciate your honesty. I'm taking away the point.
Honest guy.
For Texas, the thing I want to highlight is that they were excellent defensively against Colorado State, but they still have something to prove. Facing Michigan will be a limitless test for a defensive front that lost Brian Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, who were both first-round picks, and they were the ones that highlighted Texas' strong run defense from last season. So will they be able to shut out Donovan Edwards and sustain Michigan's run, who, like I said, is their identity? Well, Andrew, the answer to that question is yes, they absolutely will. Okay. I think Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullins will still be limited like they were against Fresno State, but a more extreme level, which you force Davis Warren, like I said, a walk-on, to throw the ball a little bit more. Not going to go too well for him. I am seeing an impressive 31-14 Longhorns win. It's going to prove right here that the loss of Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, is going to prove more crucial than people think. It's going to be close. But midway to the third quarter, Quinn Ewers and that high-powered offense is going to find their rhythm. They're going to get 31 on the board, and they're going to shut down Michigan's run game. 31-14, the Longhorns win. Still horns down.
Look, I have Texas as my favorite to win the SEC, so I'm absolutely with you on that, Chase. I think Texas's defensive front is going to get the most of what Michigan is lacking now that their 2 threats are gone. I think Texas wins not as big as a gap as you have it, but Chase, why don't we get into some game of picks? Because as we mentioned last episode, we are going to be keeping track of our records. And at the end of the season, there's going to be a little prize and maybe a little punishment gifted to the winners and losers. Now, even though Jake is not with us today, he is still going to send us his picks after the fact. So we're still going to record his takes. We don't have it with us, unfortunately, but we will let you know how they fared in next week's episode. So Chase, why don't you get started with the list? And again, we go with top 25 matchups. So Chase, let's get to it.
All right, Andrew. Well, before we start, I'm going to release our Week 1 records. In first place is Mr. Jake Jefferson, who had an astounding 19-2 record. Right behind him is yours truly, who had an 18-3 record. And Andrew, I thought you also had an 18-3 record, but I miscalculated and put in my notes wrong. But you did pick Fresno State. So that puts you at 17-4. So still a close race, still very good records from all three. So let's start some game day picks. We'll be going from number 25 up to number 1. This is just the top 25 matchups. Number 25, Clemson, is going to see if they can finally score their first touchdown as App State comes to Death Valley.
Now, a lot of question marks around Clemson after that 3-point showing against Georgia's defense. App State, they're one of the sneaky group of 5 programs that can upset you any given week. We've seen them do it to a lot of top-tier programs. Death Valley is going to be alive. They're going to be angry about what Dabo has presented so far in the season. They're going to score a lot more than 3 points. I think it's going to be a close battle. It's going to give Tiger fans a lot of scare and Dabo Swinney more annoying press conference questions to answer. Clemson's going to win in a close game. I think this game could go to overtime, but I think the Tigers prevail.
You know, Andrew, an overtime win. You know, I don't hate that pick. I think you're right to a certain extent. I think Clemson's D-line is still going to be dominant. App State's going to have trouble to score, but I still don't trust Cade Klubnik in that offense to produce. I still think they're going to hit a brick wall. They're going to eventually find the end zone. They're going to end up winning by 2 possessions. Close game, though, by a 2-possession win for Clemson.
You know why? Because Appalachian State uses the transfer portal. But go ahead.
Hey, Dabo's going to learn. But next up, number 24, Wolfpack faces number 14, Tennessee. Andrew, you already touched on this game. The Duke Mayo Bowl, daggone, in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, Andrew, if you want to go ahead and just restate your pick.
I picked Tennessee. I'm not going to get into my points because I already went over it, but Tennessee is my pick.
Andrew, you said it all. I don't think it's going to be that wide of a margin score-wise, as you said. I'm thinking more of an 11, 12-point win for Tennessee.
Okay.
So I also have Tennessee. Now, the number 23 Yellow Jackets, clap them up for finding their way back in the top 25, but they have a sketchy test in the Carrier Dome against Syracuse.
And now listen, Kyle McCord is now taking control of that Syracuse offense. Syracuse didn't have the best competition in week 1, but they did look impressive with what the playbook showed under a new head coach. Listen, this is a revamped team from both sides. Georgia Tech, well deserving of their appearance in the AP rankings for the first time in a few years. I still trust what Georgia Tech's done. They're still riding that high, looked really good against a very local Georgia State team. It's going to be a close battle. I think it's going to be back and forth, maybe not as high scoring as some may think. I do think Georgia Tech wins by 2 possessions, but expect a dogfight until the 4th quarter. But yeah, give me the Yellow Jackets. I think they go 3-0.
This Syracuse offense is led by former Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord, and I was very impressed with his Syracuse debut. He seems like he has a lot of chemistry, a lot of flow on the Syracuse offense. Now, we have seen Georgia Tech's play against Florida State and Georgia State, and Syracuse is making note of that. Hines King is still going to have a very effective game, but I feel like Syracuse is going to figure out Georgia Tech's offense a little bit. Kyle McCord is going to continue to put on an impressive showing. Expect a 3-point upset.
Wow.
Orange. The Yellow Jackets have found their way back in the top 25, but 1 week later, they're getting knocked right back out. Kyle McCord's having a big game, and the Orange win in the Carrier Dome.
Short-lived rankings for the Tay. Okay. It's like I said, it's going to be a dogfight, so I'm not saying you're wrong here. So we'll see what the results show.
Now, we have a pretty easy pick. Number 22, Louisville, who dominated North Alabama. It was North Alabama, right? No, Austin Peay.
Austin Peay.
Dropped 61 on Austin Peay, and they're having to face Jacksonville State, who looked horrible as well.
Against Coastal Carolina.
Coastal Carolina. I'm going to go ahead and say my pick. I have Louisville big.
Listen, I think Louisville, they're kind of more of a team that's showing how they can hurt you through the air. I think they're kind of utilizing that more than what we saw last year. They have a great receiving core. They have an offensive line that's showing a lot of promise. I do think, Jacksonville State, again, usually one of those sneaky group of 5 teams that can upset a team from here and there. We've seen them upset Florida State a couple years ago. They almost knocked off Auburn. on Auburn's home turf. It's not that kind of Jacksonville State team.
Not that same team.
Louisville's going to win big. Jack
All
Harlow's going to be a happy man.
And we have a very famous rivalry that's always very entertaining as the Iowa State Cyclones travel to number 21 ranked, defensive heavy, no show for offense, Iowa Hawkeyes.
Now listen, Iowa's defense is one of the country's best, as evidenced by last week's 40-0 shutout of Illinois State. It was Illinois State. Even though the first half kind of looked a little shaky, somehow Iowa's offense, dreadful offense, found a way to put up 40 points. And it was the 20th time in 28 games they held an opponent to under 14 points or fewer. So a very impressive stat right there, and it kind of showcased what we can expect from this Iowa team again. Top defense in the nation, worst offense in the nation. I think in a game against the Cyclones who don't have a true identity yet, they're still looking for that one-star player to lead the offensive group. I think defense is going to get the best of this game. It's going to be close. It's going to be low scoring. Give me Iowa at the end of it.
And you said it all. Iowa's defense is going to have to carry the heavy load against this Iowa State team. I think they're going to find the end zone eventually, not late in the game. But, I mean, I can't put anything past the Iowa defense. They are so dominant. It's such a shame because of all they need. Imagine if Iowa had a high-powered offense. They would be one of the best teams in the country. They would have a very true chance to win the Big Ten and be a top 4 seed in the playoffs. They're going to get off to a good start. I think defense is going to stop the run. Like you said, Iowa State just doesn't have the identity yet. They don't have that star player. Iowa, I think, actually wins pretty comfortably at home. Okay. Give me the Hawkeyes. Now, we have another pretty easy pick. North Arizona traveling to the 20th ranked Arizona Wildcats, who had a very weird and very entertaining game against New Mexico in week 1, where they eventually pulled away and had a dominant second half. After it being a very close game at halftime, I have Arizona winning by very comfortably. New head coach, new atmosphere for that offense, but it's still just as dominant as you remember from last year, and that's really going to show against North Arizona.
Look, Tatoria McMillan pulling up one of the best wide receiver showings we've ever seen in week 1. And the entire offense torched New Mexico. It was New Mexico? No. Yeah, it was New Mexico. Okay, you're right. Torched New Mexico. They have an easy opponent week 2. They're going to keep rolling. Give me the Wildcats.
All right, we're going to try to, maybe roll through this a little quicker just for time, but we have a really, really interesting Big 12, Big 10 matchup as the 19th ranked Kansas Jayhawks travel to Illinois.
Kansas is one of those teams that have a lot of returning players, and I've said this before. When you develop a group through the stages of more than just 1 year, that's going to do more for a program than people seem to realize. Kansas has got a lot of talent. They did last year. They have even more talent this year, in addition to the returning players we've already seen, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Baylor, it could be a trap game. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Kansas wins pretty comfortably.
Now, Illinois has had the same head coach for a while, and he's still trying to find his identity. He might be on the hot seat this year. It's like they haven't found that team yet, that identity that when you think of Illinois, you can.
Did I say Baylor? I said Baylor on accident. I meant Illinois. Sorry, guys.
But, I'm expecting a big performance from Daniels. Kobe Bryant's going to have a big game on the defensive side of the ball. Give me Kansas winning by 3 scores on the road against Illinois, which might be a testy game. Don't be surprised if that game's closer than what people think. Yeah. Easy game. Brian Kelly, who was just slamming the table, mad against that loss against USC, he said, we're on the sidelines to act like the game is over. Well, he's not going to have to worry about that this week as Nicholas travels to Death Valley. LSU wins big.
Shout out to the UC Trojans. They had a really big statement win over the Tigers. The Tigers still looked impressive despite the loss. There's still a lot to be excited about. If you are an LSU fan, Brian Kelly's going to get his team on the right direction eventually. Give me a big win in week 2. Now,
this is a trap game for the reigning Pop-Tart Bowl champion, the number 17 ranked Kansas State Wildcats.
Yeah.
Wildcats travel to Tulane, who is a team that has shown, especially in recent years, they are not a team to joke around with. They have a very tricky and entertaining offense. I think it's going to be closer than people think. Kansas State wins by 13.
Now, listen, Tulane's secondary to me is one of the most underlooked secondaries in the nation. They had a 100-yard pick six in their first game, and they continue to cover the middle of the field very well. Kansas State's going to have a very tough time passing the rock. I think they're going to have to utilize their run game, which they do have a very good run game with another former Seminole in the backfield. I think they're going to get a win. It's going to be testy. It's going to be close. Give me another overtime win, but for the Wildcats.
Oh, overtime. Okay, I like these overtime picks. Now, Arkansas at number 16, Oklahoma State. Everybody figured people didn't know what to make of Arkansas this year. Now, their opening week week 0 game, actually, they dropped 70 points on this poor FCS school, and their offense looked more impressive than they thought. Now, they lost KJ Jefferson, Newman under center, but it's looking like they might have more chemistry than people think. Ollie Gordon, I think, is still going to have a field day. Didn't do too much in their week 1 matchup. I think he's going to make a bigger presence for the Cowboys against Arkansas. I think they end up winning by 20, but don't be surprised again if Arkansas maybe makes this a closer game than people think.
I think Oklahoma State's going to be in the Big 12 championship game this year. They're one of my top picks, mainly because of the best running back in the nation, Ollie Gordon. Arkansas, they're a university of class. We saw them decline the 2 opening half penalties because the team they played in week 1 didn't wear contrasting colors. But they were like, no, we're just going to go and decline those penalties.
And good for them.
Good for them. I'd still listen. Week 1 opponent, it's gonna deceive you a little bit. I don't think Arkansas is gonna be a complete team this year. I think they finished with 7 wins, maybe 6. Oklahoma State, on the other hand, they're gonna be in the Big 12 championship game. Give me the Cowboys.
Now, this is another trap game. It's at home for the number 15 ranked Oklahoma Sooners, but Houston comes to town. Now, this is a team that can be very tricky in the Big 12. Now, Oklahoma, we watch their performance against Temple, looked a little sloppy offensively in that first quarter, but then they quickly found their rhythm. Defensively, they were all over the place. Temple had no rhythm on the offense side of the ball, and Oklahoma's defense was a big killer for this Sooners team just a season ago, but it looks a lot better this year. They've had a lot of incoming transfers who's already made a big impact in that opening game against Temple. I think they're going to do just fine against Houston. I think their defense is going to continue to have another impressive showing. Offense is going to stay explosive. I'm actually expecting a pretty big win against the Sooners, though some may consider this a trap game.
Now you got to remember, like you said about that defense looking really impressive compared to last year in that week 1 start. They're under defensive-minded head coach Brent Venables, who was highly successful with Clemson's defense, and it's going to translate. It's going to translate over to Oklahoma's defense. I want you to sit here and watch what Oklahoma does on the defensive side of the ball this year. I agree with you, Chase. They're going to get a big win here.
All right, well, this is another pretty easy pick. Number 13, USC has their home opener against Utah State. Now, I love Miller Moss. Miller Moss, we saw what he did against the bowl game with Louisville, dropping 6 touchdowns. I didn't know if that was a fluke or not, but this past week's performance against LSU showed that it was nothing. It was not even close to a fluke. Miller Moss is just that guy. I love his energy. I love his confidence, and I love his mission. When he goes on the field, his only goal is to put his team in the best position possible to win, and that's what he did against LSU. He did against Louisville, and that's what I expect him to do easily against Utah State. The Trojans win big.
We are running out of time, so let's kind of boost through this a little bit. You hit on all the high points. Lincoln Riley needed to make a statement win, and he did just that under a great performance from Miller Moss, who to me is the most poised quarterback in the nation. Give me USC big.
All right, number 12, Miami. Cam Ward has a big night in their afternoon game, actually, but Miami wins big.
I hate to do it, but I'm going to have to flip the U up right side this time. Give me the U and a big win against Florida A&M.
Put that U down.
No, I said for this week, it's still used down for me all the way, but for this week, it's going to be used up for the Canes, but used down in my heart.
Now we get to talk about the Baylor Bears, who travel to play number 11 Utah, where Cam Rising only had to play the first half against Southern Utah, but had an amazing statistic performance despite only playing one half. Now he gets to play the full game. Utah cruises past Baylor, and Cam Rising has another dominant performance.
Unlike DJU, Cam Rising uses his experience to his advantage because he actually learns the game of football. Being a seventh-year senior, give me Cam Rising taking down the Baylor Bears.
Game of the week. I already made my pick, so I'm not going to say much about this. Number 3, Texas. In Ann Arbor at number 10, Michigan. College game day. Texas dominates that Michigan run game. They win 31-10, 31-14.
Yeah, Ann Arbor is a tough place to play. We see top-tier programs, Ohio State, struggle to play there every other year. Texas, they're going to win the SEC this year, and they're going to show everybody why they're a national championship contender. Texas wins by 2 scores.
Buffalo travels to number 9, Missouri. An easy game for Missouri, whose offense looked impressive in their week 1 opener. Missouri wins big against Buffalo.
I'm a big fan of Cook. I always have been, and I'm going to be a big fan of him after week 2. Give me the Missouri Tigers.
Number 8, Penn State had a big, testy road game against West Virginia, but despite the rain delay, didn't affect them at all. Defensively, looked astounding, and that defense continued to dominate in their home opener against Bowling Green.
I agree. Bowling Green doesn't stand a chance against Penn State. They even excelled in my expectations. What Penn State did to Pat McAfee's West Virginia Mountaineers. Penn State's going to win this game.
Now, testy game against Oregon, who did not look that impressive in their week 1 opener. Boise State travels to Eugene, Oregon to face Dylan Gabriel in this high-powered Oregon offense who stalled last week. It's going to be a really close game. I think Oregon's offense is going to look a little better, but, I mean, they're going to have to get something figured out because, I mean, they got a testy schedule ahead. They do get the win against the Broncos. Give me Oregon.
Now, even though a lot of people have Boise State as their Group of 5 team to make the playoffs, a lot of people are going to see why that could be a reality. They have a new head coach who's been with the program for many, many years. He has relationships with these guys that coaches can only dream of. Now, Dylan Gabriel needs to have a big step-up performance from what we saw against Idaho. I think he does. I think it's going to be an offensive shootout, given what I saw, how Idaho found their way in the end zone. Boise State's going to use that same tactic. I think the Oregon Ducks win in a very, very testy game.
Dan Lanning's going to have to get something figured out about this Oregon offense. But Middle Tennessee State travels to Ole Miss, number 6 ranked. No problem there for Ole Miss. Jackson Dart's going to go insane. No problem there. I think Ole Miss wins big.
Jackson Dart him up. Ole Miss all the way.
Lane Kiffin's not going to have a entertaining press conference because Ole Miss is not going to have any issues. Number 5, Notre Dame, and Riley Leonard, who looked very impressive defensively against the Aggies like we talked about. They had their home opener against Northern Illinois. Notre Dame cruises, no problems there.
One of the best defenses in the country. Notre Dame shuts them down big.
Now, we saw a lot from the number 4 ranked Alabama and what they look like against Kalen DeBoer. Jalen Milroe is still the same Jalen Milroe, maybe even better. They have no problems against South Florida like they did last year. This time it's in Tuscaloosa, but this time the Bama Crimson Tide went big.
There's also going to be clear skies, and Jalen Milroe is going to continue to make his Heisman race seem more apparent. They have a big test against Wisconsin in Wisconsin next week, but they're going to be head to Wisconsin 2-0. Give me Bama.
Speaking of Wisconsin, Western Michigan gave Wisconsin a run for their money in Wisconsin's season opener, but now they travel to the Shoe at number 2 Ohio State, where they're going to get obliterated by this high-stacked Ohio State defense. No competition there. The Buckeyes won big.
Now, even though I have high praise for Notre Dame's stellar defense, I still think Ohio State takes the upper hand in the best defense in the country. We're going to see that on display again. Western Michigan is not going to have nearly as much fun as they did in week 1.
Taylor Downs, in my opinion, I think he's the best defensive player in college football. But to cap off the game day picks, number 1 Georgia, who still has a lot of touchdown, is still going to keep this team out of the end zone. Texas Tech travels to Athens. Georgia's going to keep them out of the end zone again. This is going to be 2 weeks in a row that no team scores a touchdown on them. You heard it here first. Georgia wins massively big.
Tennessee Tech, not Texas Tech. But yes, Tennessee Tech is going to get shut down. You did on accident, but it's all
Tennessee
good.
Tech. I'm sorry.
Look,
Tennessee Tech.
Look, Georgia, big win. Not a lot to say there, but look, we kind of extended our time here, so we're going to make this ending short. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning into Triple Option Talk yet again. Like we mentioned before, Jake, our brother, will be back for us for episode 5 next week. There's going to be tons and tons to talk about because there always is after a weekend of college football. So, guys, sit back, relax, enjoy this episode, and most importantly, enjoy your weekend of college football. As for me, Andrew, and my brother Chase, we will see you guys for episode 5.